I'm an African, I'm a West Indian, I'm a Trinbagonian. Yes, all these things are true. But I'm a working man, a Calypsonian, I'm your fellow human. Yes, I am one of you. But every time I ask you to choose your people, you start using color and class one time. But as a man who knows how it is to struggle, let me tell you how I choose mine. Like if a man could sell on the highway all day just to try and live honestly, and would break his back in a quarry for small pay. Anytime he wants, he can walk with me. But if you call yourself a top lawyer, but go to court and lie to try to save a drug pusher, if Dolce the money make you fat while your conscience grows small, you're a leech and you're not my people at all. Rise up, my people, let the world know you are alive. Let them see that despite all struggle, my people are born to survive. Men go walk over here and then beg father just to get $1. Yes, we want to be rich. We don't have money, but we'll play lottery because we think we're lucky. Yes, back and forth we switch. But some of the rich people you admire, their business is laundering drug money. And when they try to outsmart the mafia, the grave is a cane field in Caroni. But if a man could sell cloth and 20 years later he gets wealthy, he could build up as many plazas as he likes. That is the progress I want to see. But if today a man broke and hungry, and tomorrow he driving posh motor car, my people may never own a Ferrari, but at least we could get old and retire. Rise up, my people, let the world know you are alive. Let them see that despite all struggle, my people are bound to survive. There are autocrats playing Democrats to control you peewats. Yes, that's your legacy. Talking integration, but to their children teach segregation. Yes, divided unity. So you only go to shows that have your own people. Africans go to Pan, Indians Diwali, Naga. But when the both of you come out your shows and you miss your vehicle, well, it's your own people thief your motor car. But if a man could marry a woman, not his race, family, and their children play with your children. Disgrace. That is the essence of unity. But if a nightclub refuse me entry, saying gollywugs can mix with these so-called whites, that white boy who killed short to skip the country, cause in local jail every night is gollywug night. Rise up, my people, let the world know you are alive. Let them see that despite all struggle, my people are bound to survive.
Wait here, the watchman.
Hey, watchman. Hey.
Rise up, my people.
Every man's a brother, and love thy neighbor, just words on paper. Yes, we pay lip service. We go hug another, but in we corner go cuss him mother. Yes, supreme prejudice. Some Indians and whites will make it their business to hug the resources for their own clan. We Negroes will boast that how we ain't racist, because we always sleeping with Indian woman. But if a man could feed all the vagrants on the streets, my people will honor him for his deeds, and will save all the battered women that he meets. These are the things that my country needs. But if a man call himself a pundit and have a newspaper, he says to protect the poor, but only poor naked women inside it. When that pervert dead, they should bring him back as a whore. Rise up, my people, let the world know you are alive. Let them see that despite all struggle, my people are bound to survive.
Wait here, the watchman.
Hey. Hey, watchman. Hey.
Rise up, my people.
Every man's a brother, and love thy neighbor, just words on paper. Yes, we pay lip service. We go hug another, but in we corner go cuss him mother. Yes, supreme prejudice. Some Indians and whites will make it their business to hug the resources for their own clan. We Negroes will boast that how we ain't racist, because we always sleeping with Indian woman. But if a man could feed all the vagrants on the streets, my people will honor him for his deeds, and could save all the battered women that he meets. These are the things that my country needs. But if a man call himself a pundit and have a newspaper, he says to protect the poor, but only poor naked women inside it. When that pervert dead, they should bring him back as a whore. Rise up, my people, let the world know you are alive. Let them see that despite all struggle, my people are bound to survive.
Wait here, the watchman.
Oh, yes, good night, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Oh, Lord. The watchman, Wayne Head. Oi, oi, oi. You know, part of the good evening, part of the characteristic of Guyanese and West Indian society is our capacity to ignore the obvious. And when the obvious faces us, we say, well, it's controversial, you know? Oh boy. A calypso like that in Guyana would be considered controversial. You know, what the calypsonian does, and artists in general do, is they lift us up and put it in front of us to see. Look at yourself. Because a lot of times we don't want to look at ourselves. We prefer to live in this make-believe world. And then when the real world confronts us, we act surprised. It's part of our culture, part of our political culture, and it's part of our problem. It's part of our problem that we have to work through. We have to work through. And there are people who are actively working for us to live with this mask. This mask. So the real self is hidden, and we have a mask that we walk around with. The problem that I have with some of them is that they only want half the population to walk around with masks, and the other half is dealing with reality. Now, if all of we walking around with masks, you'll say all of we in this Buddha book. But when there are people who want only one side of the society to walk around with masks, and the other side of the society should take the mask off, that is what I have a problem with. And you see, part of what we have been trying to do these last 5 years is to really take the mask off of all Guyanese, but in particular African Guyanese, since there is a concerted effort to keep the mask on African Guyanese. Masking is a part of reality. You see, if you go back to the slave plantation, we had to do a lot of masking. We had to let the slave master think we hey when we day. Teacher George Young from Buxton, Proverbs man, he said, we Guinea board, not that we LA. Guinea board, go, Guinea board, the young people may not, because I wonder if they still get Guinea board wrong. But Guinea board make enough nice. I remember as a little boy, the Pereiras up the road from me at Line Top, they had a big farm in Burma, and they used to rear Guinea board. They rear a lot of Guinea board and pigeon and so on. In fact, my first pair of pigeon was from the Pereiras. My aunt worked as a maid, and they were very nice people, and they gave me a pair of pigeon. And we make the little thing by the house and put in the pigeon in the thing there. You see within 6 months, oh Jesus, Pigeon all over. Pigeon is a thing, you make plenty picnic and make them quick. We get more pigeon than we need, so we give away pigeon. But back to Guinea bird, they're rare Guinea bird, and then they make enough nice. And Teacher George said, "We Guinea bird all and not the yellow. Guinea bird go you make enough nice there, but eat dirty egg somewhere else. It's masking, you know." So masking has been part of our historical reality. You know, we had to create new languages as a form of fooling the slave master. And that is why when you go to Carnival today, you see people wear masks. Because as you all well know, that at the end of the crop, the slave masters to allow the enslaved people to have a little fun. That's why in Barbados they call it crop over. They call the carnival crop over, because when the crop was over, they get to have a little fun, and they would, sing songs and dance. And a lot of time they were singing songs about the slave master, denouncing the slave master, but he couldn't understand because they were masking. The language they were singing was a mask, and they had mask in the face, and they're laughing behind the mask, and he had no idea that they were laughing him. And so that's where the mask come from. You play mask, you know. It's really masking. So on the slave plantation, we have to be constantly masking in order to survive. And so the masking was justified when our indentured brothers and sisters came, or our brothers and sisters came as indentured laborers, not when our indentured thing. Bad speech. When our brothers and sisters, East Indian, Chinese, Portuguese, came as indentured laborers, some of them had to change their religion. They had to become Christian. Some of them had to change their names and took Christian names, masking, because they've got to survive. A lot of them remain very Hinduized, even though they became Christian. They were still grounded in the Hindu reality. So masking for survival has been part of our history. But masking in order to deny who you are is a different thing. You know, you all know this week I've been on some teaching thing because I become so exasperated when I notice bright people not acting intelligent. And there's a difference between bright and intelligent. There are people bright, but they're not intelligent. And people throwing around words. You know, and I had to last night make fun of my friend Leno Craig, who has found a new word now, fringe. Everybody's on the fringe. David Hines is on the fringe. Dave Norton pandered to the fringe, and he became the fringe. Everything Leno he mouth is fringe. And Leno is a bright boy. But I want to punch the television because he's not translating his brightness into intelligence. Because fringe has different meanings depending on who is using it and in what context you're using it. Fringe is not just a word, it's a concept. The slaves who outnumbered, you see, when he talks about fringe, he's talking about a minority of people. But I want to teach him tonight that the fringe is also the majority. The majority, fringe mean the edges of something. The edges of something. And the enslaved people far outnumbered the masters, far. But they were on the fringe of the society because they were commodities. They weren't even human beings. So Leno fringe is not just a minority. I'm going to teach you, must tune into this program. I like you and I want you to do well in the PPP. But you got to use your brightness and turn it into intelligence. Those people who came as indentured laborers and live in the lodges, and they were the majority, but they were on the fringe of society, economically on the fringe, politically on the fringe, socially on the fringe. And so when you, the grandson of an enslaved person, start talking about fringe, watch yourself in the mirror. You are still racially on the fringe of the world. And you want to cuss people by calling them fringe. You go and you cuss up on the PPP stage. They smile, they clap. And then when they're ready for share out the parliamentary seat, they give you none. Are you on the fringe of the PPP? Well, you're always on the fringe of the PPP. And it's not your number. You will always be on the fringe of the PPP. Well, maybe they give you advice, I don't know. The fact of the matter is, this is my problem, is not with people who want to go and join who they want to join. It's having joined. Then you look and call your people all kind of name. And when we call back your name, you get vexed. One could be fringe and one could not be fringe. As an African, as a black person, collectively we are on the fringes of the economy of Guyana. We are not in the center making wealth in ways that others are making wealth. We are on the fringe in that sense. But we give Guyana a lot more, even though we are on the economic edges of the society. We give Guyana its dance. We give Guyana its song. We give Guyana its artistry. I'm not saying others don't, but I'm saying we do, and probably disproportionately. Whether it's in sports, whether it's in dance, whether it's in song, we are not the fringe. We are at the center of Guyana's cultural milieu. And so when one talks about fringe, when one uses words, one has to be careful. It is why you all sacrifice and send me to school. So we can take your experiences, as Guyana said, take the people's experiences, refine them, what you call write paper and research, that's what they call refining it, and then give it back to you as nourishment. Not giving it back to you to cuss you. So you won't send me to school to come back and cuss you. You all send me to school, send us to school, so that we can take your experiences, turn them into knowledge and so on, and then use our intellect to give them back to you. Young Elston Lowe was on Leno Craig and his friend's show last night. And they were pushing the boy to condemn the PNC and APNU and Norton. And then eventually they invariably get to me. And they start to want the boy to condemn me. So the boy said he don't like my rhetoric. And he talked to me about my rhetoric. And it is true. The young man spoke to him about my rhetoric. And he has a right not to like my rhetoric. But the young man went on to say that David Hinds has an ability to take complex things and to break them down and explain it for people. And therefore, he's very useful. And the 5 paths of voodoo, they don't want to hear that. Because they want to invalidate some of us. And in the process of invalidate, they're exposing their own limitations. Because they're confining meanings to things. Long conversations, and they're not dealing with the reality. So masking is justified when you're masking in order to win, in order to beat back oppression, in order to survive injustice. But when you're masking in order to deny who you are, it's a different kind of masking. When you're masking to hide your identity in order to fight the good fight, that's masking for liberation. But when you are masking to deny your own identity, you're masking in order to suppress your own freedom. Frantz Fanon, Black Skins, White Masks. Whenever you all get some time, must read it. It's not a very big book. And nowadays you can go on in the internet and you can get those books summarized. Black Skins, White Masks. And he was talking about black people who their skin is black, but they put on that mask to hide their blackness. Because as I've been explaining to you all, blackness is not just your phenotype, your skin color. That's one form of blackness. Blackness is also ideological. How you think. Are you thinking black? And yes, people do think black, meaning whether your thinking arises out of your experience as a person of African descent or a black person. Over a long period of time, going as far back as the beginning of humanity, because the beginning of humanity was in Africa, come right through to the present, people, whether you're African people or Indian people or European people, over that long period of time, people have developed ways of expressing themselves that is unique to the group. They develop ways of engaging the world that are unique to them. They develop ways of constructing their reality that are unique to them. And so over time, all of that, you put that together and it becomes culture. They develop a culture. So there is such a thing as an African culture. Edward Blyden, an African leader from St. Thomas, the Virgin Islands, and he migrated to Africa, lived, I think, in Sierra Leone. He ran newspapers, and he developed the concept called the African personality. The African personality. And if there's an African personality, there is an Indian personality, a European personality, etc. And he's saying that there is something about the African personality that is unique. And he's talking about the collective personality, not necessarily the individual. The individual is a subset of the collective, and the collective is the sum total of all the individuals. And Edward Blyden, and those of you who are inclined and has never heard about Edward Blyden before, he's very important in the annals of modern African politics and history. From the Virgin Islands, what is now the U.S. Virgin Islands, Edward Blyden, he coined the concept of the African personality. And he's saying that African personality is unique to the African. It arises out of the African experience. And the African experience, in many regards, is unique. And it's not unique in the normal sense of the word unique. It is unique because it has been part of the most unique experience in the world, and that is chattel slavery. Chattel slavery. You know, I had a conversation with one of my neighbors here a couple of nights ago, and he was arguing that we should stop talking about slavery. Because when we talk about slavery, we are giving the impression that Africans were slaves. And I told him that you're wrong, you're right, but you're also wrong. Because if we remove the history of slavery, the period of slavery, from world history, then what we are doing is allowing white people to get off free. Slavery never existed. Slavery never existed. As you know, in the United States, there's a movement now to reconstruct slavery as a good thing, that slavery was good to black people. And so I was pointing out to the brother, you have to be very careful that you are right, but you're also wrong. You are right that black people were not slaves. And when we talk about slavery, the suggestion is that they were slaves. But if you remove the period of slavery, then what you are removing is white people are responsible, but very importantly, you're removing the basis. You're removing the roots of a lot of what black people are today in the world. Because out of the slave plantation came a resistance culture, came a creative culture. That is, African people were able to use their enslavement as an impetus for a new kind of culture that we call Creole or diaspora culture. That would help them when slavery was over. The greatest mystery in the world, the modern world since, is how can people who were enslaved for 200 to 400 years, in the case of Guyana, get out of slavery in 1838, and by 1840, they're buying lands and creating scores of villages. How could they do that if they were chattel for 200 and odd years? But they could only do that because while enslaved, they were able to reconstruct themselves out of the ashes of slavery and to create a new entrepreneurship. Of course, they came as entrepreneurs from Africa. So through historical memory, they remained entrepreneurs even though they were commodity. People became entrepreneurs as a result of selling and buying them. Yet, they were able to hone entrepreneurial skills so that they came out and they're buying land like crazy. Slaves who were commodity, enslaved people who were commodity. They are now buying land, entrepreneurs. And they weren't just buying land. As we always like to remind you, they're turning those lands into spaces of humanity. Villages, places where you can live, setting up government, setting up economies, setting up churches and schools, the basis of human civilization. They could only do that because on the plantation, they never considered themselves slaves. They never saw themselves as slaves. They were conscious of their own humanity. And they were anticipating emancipation. Emancipation was on their mind. So 1 year, 1 day after emancipation, they were able to create economic miracle. Brother Guyana has that book called The Legend. That's another book. I'm in book mood tonight. Brother Guyana has a book called The Legend, which chronicles the village movement. It's based on an interview, a long interview I did with him. And I know that book is around. So if you all can Google it, it's really the most comprehensive study of the village movement. And Brother Yusuf, if you're listening tonight, I know sometimes when your grandchildren or your son is around, you get to listen. If you're listening, Jambo and Dugu, and we love you. The Legend is the most comprehensive study of the village movement. And Brother Yusuf characterizes the village movement as part of world history because it has never been replicated at that level anywhere else in the world. So here are these Africans in Guyana creating world history. And somebody like Leonard Craig, watch a son of Africa who has continued in that tradition and calling him fringe. It is the Guyanas of this world who made it possible for the David Hinds and others of this world to be able to continue the tradition. And it is the David Hinds of this world who make it possible for dark-skinned boys like Leno Craig to even open their mouth in this society. And you cuss your mama, you cuss your daddy. Pig ask him, mama, where your mouth long? Say, wait, your turn to come. You tell your daddy, mama, the mouth long. Your turn to come. So, one has to be careful when one is characterizing people and characterizing society. You really have to spend time thinking. One of the things I learned very early as a child, I couldn't characterize it in words at the time, but I learned to think. Because I live in the center of the village and the big men would come every night and they would talk from war that going on, to famine, to what's going on in Ethiopia. And those men weren't just chatting, they were thinking. They were thinking. Later on, as I become mature, I realized that's what they were doing. That's what they were doing. They were thoughtful men. You go to the market and those women there, they could tell you everything about the fish they're selling. Everything. Everything. They were philosophers. They didn't have the opportunity to go to university and all of that thing, but they made sense of the world around them, the village around them, and they construct a notion of society that younger people like myself would then take into the university. My most popular course for the last 15 years is Bob Marley, Resistance, Reggae and Resistance, where I took Bob Marley's lyrics and teach the politics. What does Bob Marley mean when he said, in every man's chest beats a heart? He's talking about human and racial equality. So taking the lyrics of Bob Marley, who left school. Yes, he's a school dropout. And here I am. I managed to escape school dropout, but I take the lyrics of the school dropout in order to advance human knowledge. He, Bob Marley, had a tremendous intellect. Tremendous intellect. Guyana left school and started to teach at age 15. He never went to university. He got degrees, he do them, but long time they used to call it correspondence, distance learning. Now you all call it, online education. They didn't have online in back then. C.L.R. James, perhaps one of the two great philosophers of the 20th century, of any race, never went to university. But these men were and are, and women, they were and are intellectuals. By the time I got to university, I had already had degrees. Because when you listen, them men and women in this village, full of knowledge, full of philosophy. We tell stories now. We are now older. We tell stories about those men and recognize that those men and women were exhibiting tremendous intellect. What this world would have become if they had the opportunity to go on to university. And these are higher learning things. A simple thing. The old lady, Brother Guyana captures it in his play Promised Land. Promised Land is a play that explained how Buxton was bought, and by extension, how villages were bought, the process. And here is the old lady, gang gang, Pickney, Bush got A's. Just think about that. Bush got A's. Well, you know, literally, Bush and got A's. So she's talking deep philosophy. She's talking deep philosophy. She talk but people, watchman, people come for hear what we plan and for care back news. She talking about traitors. She talking, I won't call the name tonight because I don't want to dirty up me teaching. But some of them we call by some name. It's them she talk about. Pickney, Bush got A's. She not talk about a bush. She talk about what they underneath and behind the bush. Now we are discovering this kind of knowledge in university and using it. So when people are talking using words, they have to be extremely careful. They have to be extremely careful. People had ways of explaining things. I grew up hearing women very waxing lyrics. What and I carry me lap 2 times, hear me auntie said that steady. Later on I understood what she meant. But they're taking images that they are familiar with and explaining their reality Today, if me auntie were here and she said, they would tell she's obscene and she common and so on. And that's what I mean by the kind of society that we live in that is unable at certain levels to face our collective reality. If I say, you know, I go to Monrepo and I see people from BV buying something in Monrepo that is sold in their village, the older people, because they're intelligent, would know that what I'm saying is that you must buy what your village produce in your village, and you only buy what you don't produce outside of the village. That's rudimentary economics. And the older people, my auntie and them, would have recognized what I'm saying. Today, they take that and make it into a controversial thing. What kind of society are we building? What kind of knowledge base are we leaving for our children? Martin Carter says, I come from the nigger yard. Today they will tell Martin Carter, you insulting black people. When you behave bad when I was a boy, they will tell you, you behave like a nigger man. They understood when they used the word nigger what it means. A nigger man was one who acted outside the societal norm. But you would tell them, oh, they're using the word nigger to describe their child. We are really creating an unintelligent society. Because in order to damage the reputation of people you don't like, you take normal words and you make them into something. I saw the Stabrook News did a wonderful editorial, and they described me again as controversy. I think they may have used the word controversy, and to say that I would not appeal to a large swath of society. Yes, I'm an academic, but I am controversial. And so one thing. Stabrook News don't make that conclusion long time about what the future will be. And that's part of the problem with Guyana. We are not allowing this society to live itself out. And that is why when the young people surprise all of us by turning against their ethnic party, all of us were surprised. Because we tried to create a society in which we can predict expectations. We can predict behavior. You cannot predict behavior. You cannot predict human behavior. You can use history to make some projections. And then when the young people act, we then make conclusions about their action, not taking their actions, putting it within a larger historical context, and then ask, what does this tell me? We come with conclusion. Ethnic voting patterns done. Black people turned their back on their leaders. They ain't hear David Hines' sermon and all kinds of things. No one, or not many of them are prepared to ask themselves, what questions are these young people asking of this society? Because by their action, they're asking questions of their society. But they are busy talking about who the people reject, who the young people reject, and who they this and who they that. That all we can do in life is reject, reject, reject. We can rebuke. I think those young people are rebuking all of us. All of us, they're rebuking. They choose, for us who in the APNU, we may argue that they choose the wrong time to rebuke. But that's another story. But we have to be realistic. They're rebuking not only APNU, they're rebuking the PPP. Because the PPP believe that they would have run to them with all the $30 billion and all the little money they're giving them. And they didn't. They did not. They didn't just rebuke APNU about APNU storming office. They rebuked the PPP about the PPP storming office too. And they're saying that we don't want that. And you bring all this money. APNU didn't carry money to them. The rebuke of APNU is a family rebuke. The rebuke of the PPP is that you want to turn us back into the plantation, and we ain't doing that. As I say, I am disturbed at what passes for political conversation. And I'm afraid that our young people who bother to listen to some of that conversation, if not all of it, are being socialized in a counterproductive way. As you all know on this program, you always vex with me. Sometimes I know. I never call Jack Dio racist. I never call him a racist. Because I don't know that. I've never heard him say, I believe in the supremacy of Indian people. I've never heard him say that. But he is presiding over a government, and he is implementing policies that is leading to racial inequality, and that has already led to racial inequality. So his policies outcome is leading to racial and ethnic inequality. And the basis of racism is racial and ethnic inequality. In that sense, he's embracing structural racism. He's embracing structural racism. Yet Jack Dio every day and others, call me racist. Part of it may be ignorance, part of it may be willful. In that, the Gobel's thing, if you repeat something over and over, you come to believe it. Even the ordinary Indian people who are on Facebook calling me racist, I don't think they even believe that. Because I tell you, if I decide to play me head crazy and go and say, I resign from the WP and the APNU, and I'm now a PPP member, all the racism what they calling me done. I will become the most honorable Dr. David Hinds. That's how the society operates. That's how the society operates. And it's not the right way to develop a society. It's not the correct way, but that's the reality. That's the reality. That's the reality. In 1978, I was a teenager still. Me and Sir McGarrill, Aswell McGarrill, Owen McGarrill, he's a retired teacher now from Buxton. We were dramatists at the time. And a young man named Busty who was dead now. We left and we were doing drama in the village. We had a thriving drama group. And we felt that we wanted to contribute to racial unity in the country because we felt it was the way to go. We were WPA people. And we went to Freedom House, walk into Freedom House. They had a drama group called Workers Stage. The leader of the group was Gail Teixeira. And we walk in. We told Gail Teixeira, we come to join Workers Stage. And we told her what we wanted to do. We wanted to go into Indian villages because Workers Stage was going into Indian villages and doing plays and so on. And we felt that we could make a contribution. And we remained members of that group for 2 years. That's where I met Shirley Edwards. That's where I met Daniel Ramutar and Clement Roy and all that group of people, Navin Chandupal and all of them. And not one day Gail Teixeira ever asked us to join the PPP. Not one day. She never did. She never asked us to join the PPP. Never. I fancy myself that I could write at that time. And I, wanted to be a newspaper writer. And I spoke to Brother UC and he sent me with a note to Mrs. Jagan, Janet Jagan. And she took me on as a part-time reporter. They used to call it stringer in those days. I remember well. I worked for 10 cents per line. And I would do stories on sports and all kinds of things on the East Coast. I would go from place to place as a boy and thing. And that lady never asked me one day to join the PPP. They knew that I was WPA. And I wanted to reach across the ethnic and racial aisle. And I felt I could do that based on my skills as a boy. I didn't think that I have to go and join the PPP in order to contribute to racial unity. And those people didn't ask me. Mr. Jagan never one day asked me to join. I would go there and you would see Dr. Jagan. I would talk with Dr. Jagan regularly. That man never asked me one day to join the PPP. Never one day. I'm saying that to say the difference between then and now is that those people respected my dignity. That they were not going to ask me to sell my dignity. The difference now is that these PPP leaders are not just asking you to join the PPP. They're giving you money and buying you. And they're disrespecting your dignity. If you want to join the PPP, you join it of your own accord. I am sure Dr. Jagan, Mrs. Jagan, Gail, as I said, I got to know people like Donald Ramutar and Clement Roy, who we are not friends, but we have maintained contact to this day. I got to know, and none of them ever asked me to join the PPP. Never. Never. They would have, in my estimation, they would have found it insulting to ask me. And I would have found it insulting. Because what would I go and join the PPP? If you force me to go and join the PPP, then I would go join the PPP. I'm forced to join the PPP. And so I have to find ways and means of justifying why I joined the PPP. That's a tangle our comrades find themselves in. I know there are Indians who grew up with the PNC. Nobody had to go and beg them and pay them. So the way in which our society is moving, and the people, thanks to social media, who are putting themselves forward as scholars and all kinds of things, they're failing themselves and failing the society. You said Leonard Craig describing Sherrod Duncan as a comedian. He's a comedian. And he's going to Parliament because he's a comedian. I don't know what personal thing he had, because he said Leonard Craig is an AFC man. It's not me says so. Is Vidya said he's an AFC man. They don't consider him PPP. And Sherrod was AFC. And so they probably had their problems there. I don't know. But you are demeaning comedians. Comedy is a very important tool against oppression. It's part of the creative intellect. I don't think Sherrod is a comedian. Sherrod is very funny. He has ways and means of expression. He makes people laugh. But you are demeaning comedy, which is a source of economic. You just have to go among Black Americans. A source of economic upliftment. Some of the great personalities in this country. Dave Martins was a singer, a songwriter extraordinary, but he was a very witty person, and he would fall in. I saw him at comedy shows in Washington, D.C., and he's one of the great personalities. Henry Rodney, my classmate, God bless that guy, from the time we were children. You knew that there was something in this guy who had a turn in the way he explained reality. Yet that man sit down there and wanting to demean Sherrod Duncan by calling him a comedian. And this is what you do when you find yourself in a strange land. You all know that song? By the rivers of Babylon. How can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? You have to unstrange the land. Or you have to act strange. And people like myself refuse to act strange. We spend our lives trying to unstrange the land, trying to make the land a place where all of us can express ourselves without fear, where all of us can bring our cultural heritage to the table and create this mosaic, this beauty of diversity. As David Rudder said, you can be you, me can be me. That is the damn thing self. That is beautiful. But when David Hines said, I am me, is controversial. Sisters and brothers, those of us on the APNU side, we have suffered a massive defeat. And people are right when they're asking for introspection, going back to the drawing board, rebuilding, all of those things. You are correct. But man shall not live by bread alone. The Christians have taught us that. That politics are more than just an election. You may lose an election. You may be defeated at an election, but you're not defeated politically. You may be electorally beaten, but you're not beaten politically. And we have to see politics in holistic terms. Unfortunately, we have allowed ourselves as a society to believe that everything begins with election and ends with election. Elections have consequences. They do, because they determine who governs, and who governs determine who gets what, when, and how. But elections have to be seen within the context of something larger than elections. Elections must be seen as the outcome of something. Our electoral behavior must be seen as an outcome of something larger and fundamental. If life begins with election and ends with election, then when what happened recently, we will only see it within the context of the election. When what happened at the election could well point to something deeper, a deeper crisis in our society, a deeper crisis in our community. What are those young Africans who decided we are not giving our votes to those who want to buy our votes and to buy our dignity? We are not giving it to them. But we are also not giving it to our own, who we think are not hearing us, are not constructing us in our true image. They pointed to something larger than election. The election was the occasion for the expression of the disdain for the PPP and the possible and probable discontent with their own. That is where our minds must go. The political party will be rebuilt. But what needs to be rebuilt is the architecture in our society and in our country. That is where the rebuilding has to take place. And you can't see wood and call it concrete. You can't see a concrete home and engage it as though you engage in a wooden home. Those are some of the things that we have to begin to think. Change is inevitable. The one thing that we are certain about is change. And change doesn't mean that you have to throw away the old and create something new. What change means is a continuity. Continuity. That the change has to come out. The future has to come out of the present. And the present has to come out of the past. And the colliding of the past, the present, will tell us something about the future. Let not your hearts be troubled. The world has not caved in on us. There are some people who like to cave the world in on us and to crush us, to crush our spirits. But we refused to be crushed. We refused to be crushed. Let us mourn politically, because defeat is hard. Defeat is hard. Yes, Miss Moore, I know you expect more from Leonard Craig. Many of us do. Because he's a work in progress, and I am prepared to work with him. He has to translate academic into intellectual. And he seems not to understand that. And so I continue to pray for him. I genuinely congratulate James Bond for becoming a parliamentarian. I genuinely. The other one, what's his name? Ruel Johnson, a brilliant writer, And sometimes you wonder that over the last 5 years, he used his pen in some sick ways. But I still congratulate him on becoming an advisor. And let him remember it was the WPA leader who made him an advisor under the coalition government, Dr. Rupert Roopnarine. And he curses the WPA today. That's what you call ungratefulness. He wasn't from the WPA, and Dr. Rupert Roopnarine made Ruel an cultural advisor, or whatever he was. And the PPP now has made him an advisor. But you don't have to use your pen against your people like that. Nothing positive about your people. I don't belong to the PNC. I never belonged to the PNC. I did not grow up in a PNC home. When Guyana and Burnham broke in 1971, my home became a Guyana home. So I grew up in a Guyana home. I didn't grow up in a PNC home. I became part of an anti-PNC movement, reflected in the form of the WPA. But there are things that the PNC did for this country that are positive. And Burnham was not this supreme devil that he's made out to be by some black people. As one, and as we develop and mature as a society, we have to begin to look at all our leaders as part of our society. Young Birbal Rivaldo, he talked about Burnham, Rodney, and I think Jagan. I'm not certain, but and that's what you want from our young people. An appreciation of what none of them was perfect. Not Jagan, not Burnham, not Rodney, not Guyana. None of them was perfect. But all of them contributed positively to who we are today. When you pinch me, you don't only see Guyana. You may see Guyana first, but when you squeeze, all the others are there, Burnham and Jagan and Rodney and the others. And that is the legacy I want to leave and try to nurture among our people. Black people alone can't run this country. If the country was black people alone, yes, black people will have to run the country alone. Indian people alone can't run this country. Amerindian people alone can run this country. They are the first people, but they alone can run this country. And they alone should not run this country. And any party that is trying to run this country alone has bad intentions. Bad intentions. Bad intentions. Let me end by saying this, and I'm going to get into more of it. Azzuddin Mohammed got votes from the APNU. The APNU base. Azzuddin Mohammed got votes from the APNU base. And the first political act of Azzuddin Mohammed is to want to get the GCOM commissioners nominated by the APNU removed. Let me repeat that. Azzuddin Mohammed got the overwhelming majority of his votes from the APNU base. I didn't make that up. That's a fact. How we get it, we can quarrel over that, but he get it. And Azzuddin Mohammed's first political act is to want to get rid of APNU GCOM nominated GCOM commissioners. Figure that out. You all figure that out. Azzuddin is not saying, look, there are 3 commissioners. They got 3 opposition parties. Maybe it's time for each of the opposition parliamentary parties to get one of the commissioners. That's not what he's saying. He wants the authority to remove the 3 that's there and to put the 3. Sometimes you have to let things play themselves out. If you don't understand your society, if you don't understand politics, and you want to be a political leader, you get yourself in trouble. And in getting yourself in trouble, you put your country in trouble. I gotta go. We gotta go. We've been at it for more than an hour. I'll be back tomorrow night. And all of you are asking for the guests. They're going to come back. Henry Jeffrey, Dr. Adams, Ogunse, Apostle Landon, and all the other guests. They'll start coming back next week. But tomorrow night, I'll be back again for us to wrap up our week's conversation, not weekly, our week's conversation. And then next week, we're going to mix it up with the guests. See you all tomorrow night.